Please don't tell my little happy heart that the nightmare moon is word to word.
Got the tribe out here that's living the life. Stack these racks on the daily just to survive. It's a battle out here trying to get it right. 'Cause the tribe's out here just catching the vibe.
No, these bills ain't gonna pay themselves, so I hustle, and I grind overtime. Burn like moonshine as it boils up your spine. It's a full-time job trying to keep my mind.
Hey, what's good, everybody? Hold up. Look, I got my mic all over. I wasn't ready to start, but here I am. What's going on? What's going on, everybody? How y'all doing tonight? Needed a drink of water. Hope everything's going good, man. If you're wondering where the most handsome part of Foxing Around is, he will not be joining us tonight, man. My brother is in Arizona right now, but it sounds like he might be coming back. So he's celebrating his birthday out there with his people. So I hope you're having a good night, bro. I'll take it from here. Hopefully I do us proud. But yeah, River will be joining us back next week. So much love. I hope everybody's doing well, man. How y'all been doing? You want to do us a quick favor? Just give this video a like, give it a quick share. I'm going to throw that at the bottom. There we go. So we're here. This is my first time doing it alone. I'm a little nervous. Just kidding. No, I had to do it once with Dreezus, but that was a completely different reason. I thought River was going to be here, and then he ended up getting stuck out in the bush on his quad. So that's a funny story. But yeah, I had to do that one alone. But other than that, never did a solo episode. So yeah, I hope it goes well. But yeah, River's celebrating his birthday for all y'all. You know, the viewers better not go down too much. I know you guys tune in for his handsome face, but but let's get into it, man. Our guest, Miss Carleen Jackson, man. So she is a athlete. She is a painter. She is a humanitarian. She has so many cool titles, man. We were just chopping it up in the back. She's really great people. I'm really excited to do this episode, and y'all got to check out her background. So I'm going to introduce her here. Shout out to Miss Carleen Jackson. Hello. How y'all doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you. Yeah, I'm really excited to do this. Thank you for agreeing to come on.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So first things first, why don't you just introduce yourself, tell the people where you're from and where you're at currently.
Hi, I'm Carleen Jackson. I am a sports artist and human rights artist from Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. I paint for the best athletes in the world, from the MLB to the NFL to the Bundesliga in Germany, the Premier League in the UK, the NBA, the MLS, everything. And then I also do human rights projects around the world, working with different organizations, individuals, and groups that combat global injustice.
Dang, look at that. That's a hell of an intro. So the first question that we always ask, like, what's it been like for you to navigate like through COVID and like since the start of COVID? Has it been hard for you? Have you been adjusting pretty well? Like, what's it been like?
So being a self-employed artist, and introverted, you spend many weeks on like a painting where you don't see anyone. So when COVID hit, I was like, and it's like, everyone has to stay home, work from home. I'm like, well, this is what I do anyways. But it was interesting because there was a shift, because sports shut down for a while, right? And I was like, what's that going to look like? And then I just had a bunch of clients who were at home staring at blank walls in their mansions and like, I think I need a painting. And so I got hit up by like everybody. It was crazy.
Dang. Yeah. So just from COVID, like what's the first or the coolest one that like painting that you've done since COVID happened?
Well, when it first happened, I got hit up by Shea Ojo, who plays for Liverpool in the UK, and he was building a man cave, and he wanted me to paint a few of his idols. So I did Michael Jackson and Biggie, and those are up in like this like completely custom man cave he built out in Liverpool in the UK. And then I got asked by Tyrann Mathieu, who plays for the Kansas City Chiefs. His fiance asked me to paint a huge like 5 by 7 foot piece of when they won the Super Bowl. And he's in the middle and it's a big huddle. And that was the biggest piece I've done. And for an amazing human too. Tyrann does so much for the community in New Orleans and in Kansas City. And those are really cool. So that was like the beginning of my COVID journey as an artist. That was really fun.
Dang, that is exciting. All right, so now we're gonna throw it all the way back. So you originally come from Vancouver. Like, when did you're a footballer, right? So you're a soccer player for everyone else that doesn't know what football is. Well, yeah, we're gonna say football a lot. We're talking
Yeah,
about
football.
soccer. Yeah, we'll clear it up. So you started playing soccer at 4 years old. Tell me what it was like the first time you played, and like, how did you enjoy it initially? Like, what was it like?
My parents told me I didn't like I liked it initially, but my whole family were athletes, are athletes to begin with. My mom swam for UBC. My dad was a baseball and basketball player. So, and my brother's a 6'8" tall basketball player. So like, you didn't have a choice. It was like, pick a sport because you're an athlete. It's like, well, damn. Okay. And so I tried many sports, and I ended up really loving football or soccer. But I didn't fall in love with it till I was about 8 or 9. And then when I was 12, I entered into like elite level training program. And it was basically like, are you going to do this or are you not? And I was really introverted. So I remember crying on my first day. My mom was like, you're going to love this. Like, just trust the process. I'm like, okay. And so, yeah, that's when I started like high level when I was 12. And then I played for my senior team in grade 8 in high school. We went to the BCs and everything. And like, everyone thought I was like a senior and I'm in grade 8 because I was 160 pounds and 5'10". And I started as a left back, and then I ended up trying out for the Team BC quite a few times, but because of all the politics, I didn't make it till my third time trying. And I just turned 15. And so that was a big win for me. And then I got scouted by Division I schools all over the States. They came up and see me in different games and instances. We played in Portland at the Nike Tournament Cup. And then I had more schools scout me, and then I got offered a bunch of scholarships. I went to Indiana on a scouting recruitment trip, University of Louisiana, et cetera. So,
Dang, that's dope. I want to roll that back because there was one piece of important information that like I feel like all athletes can relate to. Like, as when you're like a little bit younger, like how is it to like go through that politics, and like did it only like make you try harder? Obviously to a point it did, but like were you frustrated? Did it beat you down a little bit knowing like, hey, I should probably be here, but for whatever reason I'm not?
yeah, it was, I guess you are right. I was young to experience something like that,
Yeah.
10, 12, 13. Yeah, what bothered me is like, as we all know, any kind of elite level sports, there's so much politics, right? Like behind the scenes politics. It's just, the more that I've learned about working now in professional sports, it's outrageous if fans actually knew what goes on. It's just mind blowing. But back then, it was more like a lot of the other girls' parents would play the politics and would play the game. And I was very introverted and very shy and reserved. And I wanted to be selected on the merit of my talent, not because my parents were like cozying up to the coaches, which a lot did. And so for me, that was really important. And yeah, it was really difficult though. Even when I made Team BC, because then I also went to a soccer school. Burnaby Central became Canada's first soccer school. So it was Canada soccer coaches, and every morning for 2.5 hours, our class was soccer at BC in Burnaby at the Lake Stadium. And so, yeah, that was really cool. But again, so many politics, and that was really hard to navigate because I'm naturally not a very controversial or political person in that sense, like the manipulation and the game playing and all that. I just wanted to play the games that I love. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So you did get the chance finally. Tell me about like what the like recruiting process is, because like you're not getting looked at from like Canadian schools where it's like we both know as athletes, like it's a little bit different up here about how they go about scouting and recruiting and everything else. So like I can only imagine like how much it like took them to come see you, but also too, where like you getting hit up a lot, and like was it weird, almost like invasive to have them come out and do the things they were doing?
No, it was crazy a little bit. Like now looking back, I don't think I quite understood how crazy it was, right? I mean, America has some of the best athletes in the world, and here you are, like a Canadian being recruited because you're better than a country with 330 million people. So that's wild. But I got like 10 or 20 letters from top tip ones like ASU, Arizona State, Indiana University, Louisiana Lafayette, which I ended up going. And I remember like the day they opened recruiting, because they're not allowed to contact you beyond like before that date. And at 6 a.m. I got my first phone call, and I was just elated. I'm on the phone with ASU, like, is this for real? Like, and then there was a lot of pressure when, you were told, hey, we've got 20 scouts from Div 1 schools coming to see, you and other players play. So the pressure's on. And it was one game. It was probably the best game of my life. We were playing the older Team BC. And they had a lot of scholarship athletes on that team, and I wasn't letting anyone through as a center back. And I was just like, and they kept subbing in new forwards, throwing them at me. And it was like the best game I ever played. And then I just got recruited by everybody.
Dang. Yeah. One game changed it all. Hey, that's crazy. That's awesome. That's awesome. So, what made you decide that like Louisiana was your choice?
At the time, while I was trying out for Team BC, I had a pretty severe health crisis where I almost died. Yeah, I don't really want to go down that road, but it was really, really, really bad. And so it has to do with food allergies and anaphylaxis. I have really, really severe allergies, and I become allergic to all food at one point, and almost, it was crazy. And I still made Team BC while I was in the hospital all the time. But when I got recruited, I couldn't really eat anything. So recruitment trips were hard because, again, you're worried that the optics wise, you don't want to be seen as like a detriment to a team. You want to be seen as an addition. And my allergies were so severe that, like, I don't know. So it was really stressful. As I was, 16, going to the States on these trips. I had just almost died. My parents were freaking out. So I was like, I can't do another one of these trips where I like pretend I don't have allergies,
Yeah.
So on my second recruitment trip, which was Louisiana Lafayette, I was just like, the first school to offer me a full ride, I'm taking it, which was probably not the best choice. I should have gone to ASU, but I just was so stressed out and like had almost lost my life. And soccer kind of saved me in that sense, because if I didn't have a field to go to, I don't think I'd be here. And so, yeah, that's why I chose. And it was a heck of a decision because Louisiana was an entirely different world.
Yeah, absolutely. Take me through your time there. Like, what was it like? Culture shock, obviously. Like, what are some of the major differences, and like, what did you get from your time playing there?
So it actually ties into everything I'm doing now, which is cool. It'll like tie in. So we start school younger in Canada, right? So I was 17 when I went down, and I was the youngest student athlete in history at Louisiana Lafayette. And the coach that recruited me actually got fired a week before I flew down.
Tough.
And then I tore my ACL a month after I signed my scholarship, and I actually was playing on a torn ACL for 2 months, not knowing that I torn it, which is unheard of. I had so much muscular mass that, like, my surgeon was like, I've heard of this, but very rarely. Like, where do you hear an athlete playing on a fully torn ACL, And so I had surgery a week before I went down, flew down in a wheelchair. And my first 2 weeks of school, I was on crutches and rehabbing a torn ACL. And in my first week, I had discovered that my city I was in was socially segregated. So not institutional segregation, obviously, because civil rights movement, et cetera, but the school cafeteria, for example, there were black tables and white tables. The only people who sat together of different races were the athletes. And I remember, like, my first day of school, we were the only school in the States, by the way, that had a swamp with alligators. So you literally could be walking like to class, and there's an alligator just chilling on the sidewalk, like on its back, sunbathing. Like, wow.
What the hell?
No, I know. We're like, oh, this is so Louisiana, so Cajun, so. And so I was crutching to class very slowly, and this football player comes up to me, black football player, and he's like, "Excuse me, ma'am," and I'm like, "Hi," and I was very shy then, not as much now. And he's like, "Can I walk you to class?" And I'm like, "Okay." He's like, "I need to teach you something." And I'm like, that's a weird thing to say to a stranger, but I went with it. And I'm crutching along, and we're going down Rex Street, which is the busiest street in campus. And he turns to me and he says, "I want you to look at how people look at us, me being a black man, you being a white woman, as we walk down the busy street on campus." And I'm like, okay, crutching. And then I noticed, like, my vision went like from like, color to black and white, because it was like one side of the street was all black, one side was all white. The white people looked very angry, and the black people looked intrigued. Like, it was like, which team is she on? Which side is she on? Because literally, like, not only do you choose your classes in your first week, but I had to pick a race. And my entire team was white, and they were the only team on the whole campus that was completely white. So every other team was half black, about 50% black athletes, about 50% white athletes. Yeah. And this is when my eyes really started to open up to how I'd been conditioned, and all of my teammates were racist, except for a few who happened to be from Canada. Yeah. And the new coach ended up being a racist as well. And emotionally abusive, sociopathic, like all the things you hear about, like nightmare coaches in the States sometimes. He was all that. And so I tried to befriend my teammates, and hang out with them. And then they used derogatory terms to describe Black Americans a few times. And I was like, nah, I'm good.
Yeah.
We're not about to, not.
Yeah.
So I didn't hang out with a single one after that, besides the Canadians. And then it was like, okay, she's on this team. And so, my coach at several times during the year called me in and said, I want you to stop hanging out with those people.
Wow.
Yeah. Because of the humidity in Louisiana, like I said, it's like playing in hot yoga. Like it's like 40 degrees Celsius, 100% humidity. And so my girlfriends at the time, my Black girlfriends were like, girl, we need to like do something with your hair. Cause I just go crazy after practice. Like my curls are just wild. And I was like, I don't have time between practice and class to like do anything. They're like, we'll put it in braids for you. It'll be easy. I'm like, all right. So they braided my hair back. And then I showed up to practice a few times. And my coach was like, if you ever show up with braids again, I'll kick you off the team.
Wow.
And this kind of stuff just kept happening. He was emotionally abusive. It was a nightmare, honestly. Like my first 3 years in the South, like I tried to, like I made other friends. Like I was friends with a lot of football players, international students and stuff. But yeah, it was hell. And I wish I had known about the support system the NCAA could offer you, because I was so young, right? As a 17-year-old, as a kid. And then I was in a socially segregated, city and school. I remember, so regardless of what you major in the States, you have to take American history, of course, right?
Right.
So my crazy ass was majoring in fashion design. I can't sew to save my life, but I was told that you can't major in art because it'll conflict with practice time, like studio time.
Yeah.
And so for some reason, fashion design, I don't know what I was thinking. Like what? So I took an American history course. And after completing the course, I was very confused because what I had just learned did not at all align with where I was at. And considering the amount of American history in Louisiana, how integral Louisiana was to, as part of the 13 colonies, slave colonies, et cetera, right? I was like, this doesn't make sense. And as a self-proclaimed lover of education and school, this is when the seed was planted of how education was used as a tool of oppression. And it's just a colonizer telling of history, right? And so I took a Black history course taught by a Black professor the next semester covering the same time period. And it was it was night and day. It was a completely different telling and narrative. And I was like, I want more of that. And so I switched my major to Black history and started that journey. Sorry, I'm like going on a long tangent.
No, not long at all. I'm just going to pick pieces out where I see them. But so first things first, we'll get into like as an athlete, how is that like, how the hell do you navigate that? Because for me, like as somebody that is like indigenous, and visibly indigenous, like I can't really blend in, you know what I mean? So they're not going to like say those derogatory terms, or they're not going to do those things. But with you, they must have felt safe to a point to be able to say those things and to do what they were doing. And as well too, like your coach, like you were saying, like you said, like not only is racist, but also, like emotionally abusive and nightmare coaches, like we've all heard about, like we've all done. Like, how did you stay there? Like what made you like just like be like rooted in? Because I think normal people, not normal people, sorry, that's a bad thing to say. Different people would be like, you know what, like I'm out, like I can't deal with this. Like I'll transfer, I'll go somewhere else, I'll try new things. Like what made you like kind of like root down and be like, all right, like I'm going to do this here?
I guess a survival mechanism I kind of learned, which is not healthy, like coping mechanism, was to disassociate.
Yeah.
And then I also sought the help and the support of his name's Dr. Danny Cottenham, and he's a Black professor at the school who was like he was the dean of like college athletes and support system and stuff. So I literally he was my lifeline for a lot of my time at Louisiana Lafayette. And I did end up transferring. I did.
Nice.
And so in my fourth year, my coach actually kicked me off the team because again, emotionally abusive, racist. I wouldn't comply with any of his demands, like stop hanging out with Black Americans. Like, no, screw you. And like all this stuff. And so I actually got recruited that year with the help of Dr. Danny Cottenham by the NAACP. And they were having a hard time recruiting like white members. And so they asked me if I wanted to join because I was suggested by him. And my first kind of speaking engagement ever, this was in 2008 in Kaplan Parish, which is in, I think, southern Louisiana. And it's a little tiny parish town that's 70% white, 30% Black. And they had announced that now at this time there were still segregated proms in Louisiana. So like if you're black, you went to a black prom, white prom, like we still had those in Louisiana, which is like maddening, right?
Right.
So they had never been allowed to celebrate Black History Month, like as a school. They never had done it as a city, as a town. And so this was the first year they announced, hey, we're going to celebrate Black History Month in February. And so many of the white Southerners in that city, at that school, were upset. From kids to parents, there were death threats against Black students in the school. It was crazy. And they didn't really know, like the administration and everyone were like, they reached out to the NAACP. They're like, help us. And so somehow I got asked to come speak. They're like, is there any way we can find someone who's not a white American, not a Black American, but might be seen as neutral, right? And so they asked me to come because they figured that maybe both sides would like listen. And I could like decompress kind of the racial tension. And I was like, I think 19 at the time. I'm like, like my second year of Black History. So I went to Kaplan High and there were about 500 parents and students in this auditorium. And I talked about Black history for an hour or so. And then I started my work with NAACP at my local chapter and everything. And then I ended up transferring that next year. So my fourth year to an HBCU, which is a historically all Black university or college, Southern University A&M, which is in Baton Rouge, and also Louisiana. And I ended up finishing my degree in history with a specialization in Black history at an HBCU, which was the coolest experience ever.
Yeah, wow, I didn't know that. That's really cool. So once you made that that transition to like the historically Black college, was it like was that another culture shock, or like did it feel almost like where you're supposed to be?
Where I was supposed to be. It felt like home. Like being in the South, my friends who were mostly Black, who actually all 100% Black, I never actually became close friends with a white American except for White Boy. And we called him White Boy because he was the only white player on the football team who was like down. Like all the other ones were kind of racist, but he wasn't. So he was just like, oh, there go White Boy. His name was Matt, but like I said, we just call him White Boy. And so I felt like that was my family. Like this term ally, I had never heard before in my life. And when it comes to like allyship, I kind of was the definition of it, right? But for me, it felt like there was a disconnect because I was family. My friends in the South were family. Like they didn't look like me, but we were family. And that's how it felt being at Southern and even at Louisiana Lafayette with my friend group and everything. Like I remember vividly, like when I'd walk around campus, I still remember this to this day. And I walked by white Americans, they'd look past me like I was invisible. Like I remember this, like I said, so vividly in class, they looked past me like I was invisible because it's like, you chose that side. We're not even going to look at you anymore. You don't exist to us. And that's how I was treated by any white American at my school. It's like, oh no, she's with them. She's with them. She's with them. I got called a race traitor all the time, like every week, race traitor, race traitor, race traitor. And so because of that, when you do, because of how overt the racism is and how severe it is in Louisiana, it's one of the worst states, right? It's like your family then, And so, yeah, that was going to Southern. That's how I felt. It was like, I mean, first of all, you tell someone from the States that as a white person, you went to an HBCU, you automatically, it's like, oh, you invited the barbecue. You know what I mean? Like, it's like a white American to go to, like, it's just, it doesn't happen. Right. And when I say I majored in Black history, then they're like,
Yeah. Right.
I was one of those people too, where I didn't want to put the burden of my education on it, injustice on a Black American. I'm like, I want to educate myself. I want to learn myself. And I think that's what more people should do too. Cause I see that especially now people are like, well, teach me. So like, go educate yourself. The resources are there. And so, yeah, I was educated by some of the coolest professors at Southern. Like I had a jazz history professor. He was in his 70s. And this man came to class every day in a full suit, decked out, just sitting on the piano. Like, what's up? Like he was so cool. He's an OG. And I learned jazz history by listening to recreations of like the origins of jazz, if jazz are in New Orleans, right? So we didn't learn in a textbook. He actually had music that was sang by the ancestors of slaves that he'd play for us, that we would learn to decipher. We're talking like, it was the most insane, like these are the resources that this school had, right? And it really bothers me because HBCUs get like in the college ranking, they're ranked like mostly quite low, and it's the best education I've received. And I also went to UBC, which is ranked 33rd in the world. Like screw them.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. That's cool. Yeah, that's cool that you can like obviously you've seen all sides, and to be able to like navigate that as somebody that, you know, like is obviously like trying to not let like that idea of what white people are like, you know, like you're just cutting that out, you're like getting that away. And like especially in somewhere like that, like because I'm sure like as much as you like you navigated the right way and the correct way and the healthy way, like I'm sure there was like everyone around you expecting you to go this other way with, you know, with an entirely white team, you know, like you could have easily just been like, you know what, like I'm here for soccer, like I'm here to like do this, like I'm here to advance myself, like I don't want to be involved with this, and like just route it out. So to hear you like go through all that and to like be so passionate about it, like that's really amazing. So how did you like decide that like Black history was just like going to be it? Like you were like, this is what I'm studying, and like this is what I'm passionate about. Was there a moment, or just kind of like just the whole community as a whole?
It honestly started as I wanted to learn about the society that I had found myself in, right? I wanted to understand this history. Where did this racial tension come from, the segregation? Because the most I learned about the South was like a paragraph about civil rights in our Canadian history textbook, you know, like in grade 12. So I actually didn't know, and I wanted to understand the racial tension, the segregation, the history, the, you know, about the 13 colonies. I wanted to understand how this happened, right? And I didn't want to burden anyone. I wanted to learn myself because I love school, I love education. And then when I realized that I had to distrust the field of education because of institutionalized racism, especially in America and Canada, right? Like curriculum was used as the #1 tool in South Africa, in Australia, in Canada, like everywhere. They're using it in China right now on Uyghur Muslims. They have residential schools for Tibetans in China right now. And so I just wanted to understand how education, you know, how that path started, where it was used as a tool for oppression. I wanted to, and then I just like, there's this famous quote by Rumi that's, you know the truth by the way that it feels. When I heard narratives from like Black American narratives about history, it just hit home. It was like, this feels true. This fits this narrative. This fits this environment. It just felt true, and it hit different. And so I became enamored with people like Malcolm X, Muhammad Ali, Sojourner Truth, W.E.B. Du Bois, Frederick Douglass. And these people are my idols because I feel like when I learned about the depths of racial injustice in the States and Canada and everywhere else in the world, it's like something like ignited in me. And like injustice makes me so angry. Like any form of it, like it became a passion. I don't want to live in a world where people who love differently or look differently are treated differently. I don't want to live in that world. And I'm going to use every waking moment, even in the subjects I paint, to, you know, as much human rights work as I do to fight it, because I hate injustice. And so that's kind of, yeah, there you go.
Preach. Dang. Yeah. I'm gonna give it up for that. That is amazing. So take me back a little bit to your time, like as you're becoming like you finished school, obviously, your athletic career at the university had come to an end, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
You had kind of talked about it a little bit, but like, had you tried to like go pro, and like what was the, like, I know that, you know, like some injuries, you know, some things happened, like how did you try to get to that point, and what was it like?
So I had, let's see. Yeah, Team Canada would have been the next step for me. And I got invited to a Team Canada camp when I was 15. So it was like it was my first and only one. And then I got my Division I scholarship. But after tearing my ACL, like if I hadn't torn my ACL, I would have probably played for Team Canada. I was the fastest center back in Canada. And we played against, I don't know if you know Sydney LaRouche. She plays for the Team US. She played, yeah. So I remember
she jumped ship on us.
I know. Yeah. But I played against her a lot, and we were matched for speed. And then after tearing my ACL, my speed, it was the worst. My ego, like you don't even understand. But like I could play against I was playing against the best forwards in the States and Canada, and they never beat me. Like that's why I got so highly recruited. It's like you can't get past the center back. She's so fast. And after tearing my ACL, my speed was not the same, and I actually had to move positions to center back. And then I had to learn how to, you know, Ronaldinho a ball. And so that was like, absolutely heartbreaking, but I was still determined. I was like, love this game more than anything. And so I ended up applying for a tryout in Atlanta in the NWSL, which at the time was the only women's league. Now there's so many more leagues. And I was going to go, but I had two surgeries on my right knee. I tore my MCL on my left knee. I herniated a disc in my back. And then I moved a vertebrae backwards, which like opens up a room to be paralyzed, like to really hurt yourself. So
Absolutely.
I was like, my surgeons were like, yeah, we don't know if this is a great move for you. So I was kind of forced into retirement after crazy injuries. And I came home and my back was so bad. Like surgeons in the States wanted to operate, but I'm like, no, I want a Canadian opinion because I don't really trust you guys. Just want to make a check, you know? And so I came home in 2012 and I saw like 3 different surgeons and they were like, we could operate, but if you could find a good physiotherapist, we think you can rehab this. And that's what I ended up finding. So,
yeah. Like, were you, sorry. So like when you like end up getting hurt, like all of us as athletes, like we know what it feels like to like be that close to whatever, you know what I mean? We're always striving for something more, I feel like. And like to get to that point when you came home, like, was it like a defeated thing or was it more like a, like, you know, I made my mark, like I'm good. Like, what was that whole process like with the injuries and everything else?
It was like being defeated. It was like being obliterated, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Like I had hit depression for like the second time in my life. And I was living in my parents' house. I had pain-induced insomnia because I was in so much back pain. I had to get a spinal epidural every 3 months just to be able to walk. Like we're talking like this was a very, very, very serious injury. And then I ended up finding a physiotherapist who worked only with pro athletes for a long time and traveled the world doing that until he opened up his own clinic. And I found him and I've seen 6 other physios and they were useless. He actually had the same injury as me and he rehabbed me. His name's Eddie Cannon. He's absolutely brilliant. And he rehabbed me to sprinting again in about 8 months. So.
Dang. So when did you decide that like you were done with soccer and you needed like the next step? And what was the next step as like once you're done soccer, once you had come home back to Canada?
I was one of those athletes where soccer was my identity. Like, I know you hear that a lot probably, but I didn't know what I was going to be a pro soccer player. Like, what do you mean something else?
Yeah.
You know, like, oh, this was what I was going to be. Like in college, when I was sad, what most college athletes who are normal go to the bar and drink, right? Yeah. I would literally at 1 a.m. take a ball to the nearest tennis court and just play until I felt better. Like that, it was just like, it was my entire being, right? Yeah. And so I was crushed. Like take every heartbreak ever times a million. Soccer broke my heart more than that. Yeah. And so I ended up going to school. Don't make fun of me. To study sports psychology, soccer.
Yeah, there you go. That works.
So I went to UFV, University of the Fraser Valley, and because I heard they had a fabulous Olympian sports psychologist. So he is Team Canada sports psych, Roger Friesen, and I came in there and was like, this is my story. Please let me take every class. So I took literally every sports psych class, including a 3rd and 4th year in 1 semester. People were very mad, but I excelled. I was like, it was like soccer in the classroom, which is now looking back, I'm like, wow, I was a little crazy. But at the same time, I also took this media art class where we used the media arts to work with residential school survivors. And I also enrolled in this program called Women's Empowerment in the Stalo Nation. And coming home from the States, I was all like, Canada's so great. You know, like, look what happened in America. And then I like enrolled in these 2 programs with residential school survivors and with matriarchs from Stalo Nation. And I was like, oh my gosh. Like I was
got it here too. Yeah.
I was like, and I was so mad at the institution of education. I was so angry. I'm like, you lied to me. You betrayed me. I trusted you. So now I don't trust education at all. Ironically, I now have a bachelor's of education, which is good because I can change it. Yeah. But I learned, again, Canadian history, Indigenous history from Indigenous voices, from oppressed voices. You know, I learned that like the first Indigenous author wasn't until 1967. Like they wouldn't let any Indigenous authors publish. Like it's so messed up. Mm-hmm. And that is where my understanding of art for social change, like using art as a tool to raise awareness about injustice in that class, working with residential school survivors and the sons of daughters of survivors. It opened my eyes to that. And being in this course that was about women's empowerment. It was like 6 Indigenous, 6 non-Indigenous. And most of class was we sit in a circle and just tell our stories. And that's when I learned so much about the truth about Canada's history, which is absolutely no better than America in any way whatsoever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're right. So what was that like to navigate with Indigenous people then? Like, you know, as an Indigenous person myself, I feel like it's hard to even get inside of those rooms, let
Yeah.
alone be able to be heard inside of those rooms, you know? And did you feel like maybe as one of the non-Indigenous people, like you were the only ones listening, or was it pretty like inclusive by that time and like very, very open to hearing what the Indigenous people had to say?
I would say that like everyone who wanted to, because that was an Indigenous specific program, like Women's Empowerment of the Stella Nation. So you had to really want to be there and want to make a difference. Like I said, it was 6 and 6 non-Indigenous and Indigenous. And I had really amazing professors who were like deeply embedded allies in the Stella community. And so the classes that they were taught were brilliant, like working with residential school survivors, like both professors were elite in their ability to navigate these spaces and had the respect of many different nations, allowing them to do so. So really, I just did a lot of listening at that point because I didn't know a whole lot because our education is shit. So
Dang.
yeah, so I just listened and learned, and I'm grateful to the matriarchs who've taught me. Growing up too, I had a few friends from Semiahmoo Nation. Where else? Haida Gwaii, like one of my good friends is from Haida Gwaii growing up. She never told me much about her history and stuff. So I learned more as I went forward. And then I made lots of different friends in different positions from different nations. And I did my own project in 2014 with women from 6 different nations where I painted one portrait. And I don't know if you know Sasha Leung. Do you know Sasha? She's from Wet'suwet'en.
I've heard the name before for sure. Yeah.
She works for the BC to uncede territory and get governance for different nations at the BC Treaty Commission on behalf of Indigenous bands and stuff. So she became a really good friend, and I've done some work with her. But yeah, it was a lot of learning initially, and then actually working hands-on using art to navigate the space and to help tell stories and to help raise awareness. It was really powerful. And then after that, I enrolled in a few more arts classes, and I was also teaching at a private school at the time. I fell in love with art and teaching and stuff, and I decided, hey, I want to get a second degree in education because UBC had the 8th best program in the world at the time. And I was like, what do I need? And they're like, you need this many credits in art. And I'm like, okay. So I just kept taking them at UFV. Most of them were media related and art for social change related and Indigenous related. So yeah, that's how that happened.
Wow. So the art actually came from these 2 spaces, correct? For the most part, like I'm guessing, did you have like a passion for art, like as a child? Like, could you draw like you're drawing now at 12, 14, 16 years old?
Actually, yeah. So the other area that I was accelerating other than soccer was art. So I took senior level art in grade 8, apparently. So my parents were like at both schools because I transferred high schools as well. And I never had instruction though. My teacher was always just for like really good materials and just paint. So the first thing I painted was actually feet playing soccer, of course.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And then I didn't major in it in university, and I painted here and there, but nothing like to the level I'm doing now. But I did have a kind of an innate talent. Yeah, that was noted when I was very little, even when I was like 4 and 5, apparently. So yeah. And then I talked my way into 4th level painting classes at UFV. And yeah, I've never actually had someone sit down and say, this is how you paint. I'm completely self-taught. And then the first kind of oil painting I ever did was in 2014, which that seems forever ago now. FIFA had published this opportunity online called the Street Child World Cup. So 4 years before every 4 years is obviously World Cup. And then like 4 months before the World Cup, there is a Street Child World Cup. So this one was in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil in 2014. And it's an opportunity for street children around the world who, in actually the majority of countries, if you're not an adult, you don't have rights. Like in many countries, street children, if you live on the streets and you're a minor, you actually don't have rights. So they are treated kind of like garbage in many countries, including Brazil at the time. Where else? Pakistan, India. There's a lot of child slave labor in these countries too. And so they started this tournament to give street children a platform, who are the most marginalized children, a platform to stand up for other street children around the world. So this tournament had art, human rights, and soccer. So I was like it was like a dream opportunity. And I was the first Canadian to be selected. And it was like 3 interviews, a crazy process. This was Save the Children, which is the #1 organization in the world for working with children who live in conflict zones and stuff. And so I fundraised and went to Brazil. But a month before the tournament, the captain of Team Brazil, named Rodrigo Kelton, who was a street child from Fortaleza in northern Brazil, was murdered on his 14th birthday.
Wow.
So he was part of Team Brazil. When he was 5, he was a drug runner, which is really common. Like the parents send out their kids to like beg for money or run drugs. And he was found on the streets by an organization, O Pequeno Nazareno. And so he had not been home since he was like 5. And he's like, I want to go see my mom for my birthday. And they were like, we don't think it's safe. The city he's from at the time was the 8th most dangerous city in the world. So they kind of agreed, and he went home to see a girl and his mom. Of course, there's a girl too.
Yeah, always.
And he was shot feet from his mother's doorstep. And she like heard the shots and ran out. His brother was shot as well. Rodrigo was killed, and the gun jammed. So his brother, in some weird way, he kind of saved his brother's life because he took most of the bullets. And he like is falling to the ground. His mom's running over and catches him. And his last words were, "Mama, please don't let me die." And I'm reading this story, this email, and I'm like bawling, and I'm like, oh my goodness. And it talks about how soccer saved his life, and that soccer also saved my life at around the same age. And even though we came from completely different circumstances, countries, backgrounds, everything, different languages, everything, I just resonated. His story resonated with me on kind of a transcendental human level. You know, it's like I can identify with this young Brazilian boy on this level, you know. And then something like, I don't know what to call it. All my religious friends are like, it's God. I'm like, well, I don't know. And they're like, it's the creator, it's God, it's the universe, whatever. But there, you know, some voice like kind of came in my head. This might sound crazy, but it was like, paint him, paint him, paint him. And it just got louder and louder and louder. And I'm like, okay, I'll do it. Okay. So I like paint this. I grab a piece of wood. I don't know how to use oil paint. I'm just like freestyling it at this point. Never painted a face with oil paint. Didn't know how long it takes to dry. I have a wet oil painting, and it's this big. It's like this big as the one behind me. And I'm like, I'm going to take this to Brazil. Like, no, you can't take a wet oil painting on a plane. Like, are you crazy? And ignorantly, I show up at the airport carrying my bags and this huge painting. And the customs agent is looking at me like, are you crazy? Like, you're not taking that to Brazil. And I'm like, turn it around. And I'm like, and then I tell the story, and he ended up being South American. If he was American, I don't think he would have let me through, but he did because he understood, right? He's from Chile. And he was crying. He was tearing up. And then I get on the plane. I made pilots cry, flight attendants cry. I had a flight attendant move his luggage to put the painting to safely stow it to Brazil. It was just, and then along this journey, I'm like, holy crap, like art can awaken people's consciousness. Art can change the world. And then I get to Brazil, and no one knows I've painted Rodrigo. And I ended up getting to the site. And because there were 19 countries and like 11 different religions represented, we had a non-denominational chapel. So the organizers put the painting in the chapel, and the night Team Brazil gets there. No one knows I painted Rodrigo, right? And growing up in a shelter, that's their brother, right? They had just buried their brother. And so these kids have never been on a plane. Most of them had never been on a bus, like traveled, whatever, right? So we're cheering and making them feel like the most important people in the world, because they are, children are. Yeah. And it's pitch black out. And I don't know how, but someone saw Rodrigo's face through the tiny little slit doors of the chapel in the pitch black. I can't think of anything but divine intervention, because it didn't make any sense. Okay. Right. And I have no idea that they've all ran in there, and I'm coming by as they're coming out. And this site is huge. There's like 6 soccer fields, 3 dormitories. Like, again, like what are the odds of that? Yeah. And they're all crying. And I'm standing there, and they're probably like, this crazy white woman, get out of her way. I was like, and it was in that moment that my life was changed forever. Like the looks that they gave me transcended life itself. Like it was like, your family, you understand, you're one of us. And I was Brazilian from that day on. I was invited to their traditional ceremony of Rodrigo's life. Like no one else, no outsiders were invited. Not even people at the tournament, just me. Brazilians who had heard about the story, who worked on the site. Like I'd go to get food, and someone would rush over and give me a fork. Like, it was like, no, she's family. And the other crazy thing is people from white dominant countries like Europe, Germany, places in Europe, America, Canada. There was media from all over, and they kept asking, like, why did you paint this child you didn't know? But I noticed that no one from South America or Africa asked me that question. No media were like, what? Because they understood it, right? It's something that didn't need to be spoken. And these kids brought the painting to breakfast, to bed, to games. Like, they're like clutching this painting, carrying it everywhere, because it was the only way that Rodrigo was visible at the tournament. And it became this like crazy symbol. It was nuts. And then that was that moment where I was like, I want to be an artist. So
Wow. Holy man. Yeah. I got goosebumps just hearing that too. Like, obviously, like being a footballer, but just the story too, and like the impact and the importance. Like, I could only imagine like why it felt like exactly what you were supposed to do from that point. So take me from the time that you get back from Brazil. Like, do you just like hit the ground running and you're like, yo, like it's time to paint everything and like change the world? Like, I'm sure it probably felt like that. So like, take me through your journey, like after that moment.
Yeah. So I realized, like, probably most people don't want to buy paintings of murdered street children. So I was like, how can I somehow build a network? And I didn't go to art school, right? Because most, high-level artists have either like patrons, or they went to art school and got a master's in art education or painting. And so they have a network. I had no network. The only network I had was a few pro athletes that I knew. And so I started there. I was friends with some of the Toronto Raptors, and I also had started my education program at UBC, and about halfway through I started painting for pro athletes and really didn't need to finish, but I fell in love with education too. And I realized how much power it gives you in human rights, working in human rights, if you have a degree in education. So I started painting for Amir Johnson on the Raptors, and then it was Jay Crowder next, who I've done 3 pieces for. And then the NFL, and then of course my goal was to paint for the Premier League, right? Because top league. And so I painted for my friend Jonathan Mensah, who played in multiple World Cups for the Ghana Black Stars, and he plays for Columbus Crew, won a few MLS Cups. And so I did this beautiful painting for him when he was playing in Europe. And then because of his international renown, of course, a bunch of European athletes saw it and were like, oh my God, I want one. And then I started painting for like guys like Patrick Van Aanholt and just lots of Premier League players. And then I like melted, because I'm like, oh my God, this is like my dream, right? Yeah. And then my first trip to the UK, I got invited to 12 games in like 10 days. And it was just like watching football. My first game was Crystal Palace, and I was crying. I actually cried because it was such beautiful football. Like, I was in heaven, And then I lived in Europe and painted footballers and then went to see them play. Like, there's really no higher level you can get from me there. It's like, okay, I've made it, Yeah. And then from that point on, I would travel to Europe a lot, Paris, London, go live in Europe for a month and paint, come back, paint for American athletes, go to Europe, paint for, and then throughout the midst of that, I use about 15% of my profits to do human rights art initiatives. When I was doing my teaching practicum in 2014, so after the Brazil trip, my teaching practicum was in 2016 at UBC. I actually, like a crazy person, decided to do an entire campaign as a student teacher with Syrian refugees and students.
Wow.
And the president of UBC told me I can't do it. They're like, you're a student teacher. Like, not even a master's teacher could do that. And I'm like, okay, but can I do it if I get the permission of the principal? And these people are like, there's no way the principal is going to sign off on this. And he said yes. And UBC was like, and so I ended up doing an entire like campaign where I had taught curriculum on the Syrian civil war, which I didn't know much about at the time. So I built it all like from scratch. And then we worked with an actual Syrian refugee family. So it tied into, and we wanted to combat xenophobia and Islamophobia in the Syrian Delta community, because there were 25,000 refugees coming in from Syria, and there was a lot of racial tension and misunderstanding and a lot of Islamophobia. And so we did this incredible project where we worked with the family, and it was just wild. And then it was in the papers, and then UBC was like, oh yeah, look what our student did. Yes, for you.
That's funny how that works all the time, huh?
Yeah. And I called them out on it because I literally have no filter, and I will call anyone out for anything, really, when it comes to any sort of like injustice or anything, which shocks a lot of people in positions of power, which is kind of fun for me. And then, so every year I try and do 2 or 3 projects. Like last year I did, Overtime Sports.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. They have I think a combined 50 million on social channels. So they did their first Pride campaign, and I did the painting for it, where I combined 12 athletes in one face, including the the flag, like the updated flag too. So everyone was represented, every ethnicity, every gender, sexuality, etc. And so that was really cool. And then I did a project locally with Sade Johnson, who's Coast Salish, and her family, her mother, Iona Paul, the Paul family from Musqueam and Coast Salish and stuff. And we did, and Dakota Bear as well, because he invited me to be a part of the team for the Canada Day protest. And we created this incredible mural that we printed out that like Sade's mom, Iona, had these photos from like somewhere like 80 years old from Kamloops Residential School. And it's wild because I had this like vision. It was so crazy because when I was meeting with Dakota and we were talking about the Canada Day protest, like him and I had like the same idea. We're like, we want to do a wheat paste. And I had done a wheat paste project with Syrian refugees, right? And it's a special kind of art, so I knew kind of how to do it. But we didn't have photos because who has photos of residential school children? And then there's like, I mean, there's a whole process, right? And so in my head, I saw this mural, like wheat paste on the ground, this giant mural. And I'm like, okay, it has to happen. And it was the same kind of vision that happened to me in Brazil, where I was like, I have to paint this kid. It was the same feeling. And I just put it out there and wanted to fight for it. And me being also non-Indigenous, right, it makes it a lot more difficult as well. But I had Dakota support. I had other friends support, like Squamish Nation. One of my close friends, her dad's a hereditary chief and stuff. So I had like enough community support where I felt like maybe I could do something to honor residential school children and survivors, etc. So I reached out, and then Sade came through and was like, so my mom has photos because our grandfather worked at Kamloops Residential School as an Indigenous teacher because no one would hire him. And no one has seen these photos, like no outsider, no one but family. And so she invited me over, and it was one of like the craziest, most emotional nights of my life, because I they invite me to their home and they're telling me stories about these photos. And I was like trying very hard not to cry, because even holding the photos, like I just, like, again, transformative. It was as transformative for me as that moment in Brazil when the kids came out of the chapel after singing. Like, that's how it felt. It was just like, again, it felt like this is my purpose in life. And Sade and her mom said the reason they trusted me is because they felt like they looked me up online and then like just trusted their deeper intuition and trusted their deeper knowing. And they're like, no, she's pure hearted. We can work with her. She means like 100%. She's authentic. And that's how I fight. Right. So the philosophy of art for social change too is rooted in ethics. So if it's not ethical, if it's not respecting and adhering and honoring the people that you're working with, you don't do it. And so it starts from dialogue and conversation and shared experiences and understanding. And then the artwork is birthed out of that. And a lot of white artists in particular make the mistake of, one, not learning about oppression or history, two, being told in art school, you can paint whatever you want. No, there's ramifications with certain things. And three, they use other people's oppression to profit off of it in their artwork. And those are three very common mistakes. We've seen it in Canada. We've seen whited artists steal Indigenous art practices, traditional practices, et cetera, right? And so, again, I went to their house. We just had a conversation. It's just rooted in conversation and dialogue and respect and a deep honoring. And we came up with this idea to combine these photos together because I have Photoshop skills too. So I would kind of build out this mural. So I scanned these photos, and it was really hard for Sade's mom to hand them to me just because of, it's like a family heirloom that's almost 100 years old, and I felt like so honored, like, oh my God. I was just like, oh my goodness. And I scanned these photos that, she had more than the Canadian government has. Yeah. And what was beautiful too is the story associated. So Benny Paul, who was a teacher at Kamloops Residential School, who's Iona's dad, he was unable to be hired anywhere because he was Indigenous, but he had the teaching education. So Kamloops hired him, and it was the only safe place in the whole school. So he was teaching woodworking, and they knew that if they went to Benny's class that they'd be safe. And considering the abuse and I just was like, wow, So these are the only photos you will find of residential school children smiling because he was on the other end of the camera. He ended up buying a camera to capture them. Like, I just was like, wow, And so in the conversations too, moving forward, me and Sade were trying to figure out a way to honor, because there's so much erasure, right, in Canadian history. People keep saying, it's in the past, it's not in the past. There's ongoing genocide. Like Dakota was teaching me about all different forms of genocide that are still going on. Same with my other friends. So it's an ongoing genocide. This hasn't ended. Missing and murdering Indigenous women, right? And so we're like, how can we honor that as well? And so this is the coolest part of the mural too. So we decided, Sade was like, I'm going to put out a call and ask people to send photos of them in their traditional clothing, as warriors, as matriarchs, etc. And so as protectors of the children. So they were in the mural, in the Photoshop, I put them in the front as protecting the children behind. And as a message, like in Sade's words, quoting her here, she's like, we're still here, like, So it's a message to the government, the public, they're protectors of the children in the mural. And the mural ended up, we asked the city of Vancouver, because we had to ask each host nation and the city of Vancouver, because it was on city property. Now, the city didn't want us to do this. Guess why?
What? What's the reason? I don't know. There's probably a time. I could think of way too many for me, but yeah, you'll have to. What do you think?
Yeah, that's true. That's kind of an open-ended question.
Yeah.
So they didn't want us to do this because they didn't want the memorial for residential school children to go on longer. And it had only been like a month, and they kept finding more bodies. And I was like, what? So you know what I said? Because again, I love threatening colonial governments. It's one of my favorite things. Got to use your white privilege for these. And so I said, listen, one of my good friends just won Reporter of the Year, Angela, who's also Indigenous. And I think she'd really love to capture this story, and it can go either way. Because either way, it's a story. So I said, you get to decide which way you want the story to be written. And they chose, okay, we'll let her do it. So I basically threatened them into doing it, but it was worth every moment. And so they let us install this huge mural, and we pasted, and we had a big ceremony. It was beautiful and amazing. And people came, like friends of mine too, whose family members were in residential schools. They sent me their photos to be included in the pieces, and people came out and got to paste their relatives. Like it was so meaningful. Lots of tears, it was one of the most beautiful pieces I think I've ever been a part of. So.
Absolutely. That sounds amazing. Yeah. I personally, I think I heard of it because obviously through Dakota and everybody else, but I definitely want to look it back up and take a look because to know that obviously, as an Indigenous person, when things like that are getting done and there's honoring and, there's eyes on it, it's done in a good way. You know what I mean? So, and to hear you to be able to talk about how basically you went through those channels and the channels that most settlers would deem important, getting approval from the city, or you know what I mean, painting it the best you could, you know what I mean, you're no, I need to be rooted in this idea before I even try to take a look at it. And it sounds like more often than not that's your calling. Before you can even touch something, before you can even go to it, you need to find those personal connections, which and rooted in like you said, in good thoughts and good energies. And that to me is very, very extremely rare. I'm sure just in general, but in the art sector, I'm guessing you're just cut from a completely different cloth.
And every grouper in people Sade was you're the only one I've met like this. I get all the time. I get told that by different groups. They're where did you come from? It's how. But I just think there's a moral way to do things. And the thing I think that sets it apart is a lot of artists will hear about an injustice, right? And instead of learning about it or educating themselves, they'll try and appropriate it in a way in their artistic process, right? When it's a part of a cause or injustice that they don't belong to, if they're a white artist. And so for me, it's my art came from the learning. It's I went to school for 11 years and learned about history, learned about injustice, learned about the pedagogy of oppression, learned from Indigenous teachers, learned from Black teachers, learned from people who've experienced this. And then the art came after that, right? So it's I have the knowledge first. And I think that's the mistake a lot of people make, is they try and appropriate or manipulate or use other people's experiences. And it's the most unjust thing ever. It really makes me mad.
No, I can only imagine. Yeah. And to know that your pieces are coming from that, and maybe looking at somebody else's and being yo, you can I'm sure you can tell, or you know straight away, even if it's blind to the normal eye, to be like, yeah, this is pretty fucked up. Like,
Yeah.
must get pretty frustrating. I can only imagine, but it's cool that like you do it in that way. And it's nice to know, like, I'm sure, like for me personally, just as like an Indigenous person, to know that, you know, when people are doing it like in the right ways and like with good intentions and good in thoughts, like that, yeah, like you're cut from a different cloth. And like, I'm sure a lot of people appreciate what you do for them. So yeah, that's dope. I want to know, okay, I told you a little bit earlier, my dad's a big Muhammad Ali fan. You know, me as well too. Like I like the arrogance of Muhammad Ali. I like the yeah, like I'm prettier than everybody, but I'm also a killer. You know what I mean? Like I've always thought that he was like the prime human being, and also too, like, you know, the way that he handled, you know, racial tensions in the time where like everyone was like, what the, you know what I mean? And like he was so unapologetic about who he was and his ideas and what he was rooted in, that like I'm just like, yeah, this guy, like, I mean, that's exactly the reason why he's one of the most famous athletes of all time. But talk to me about the piece behind you. Like, I know it's pretty significant, pretty important. Is it your favorite too? Because I feel like if it's behind you and you kept it, it's got to be your favorite.
It's my favorite piece. And I've painted Muhammad Ali more than any other athlete that I've ever painted. So I've done 8 or I think 9 paintings of him. Every year I paint him in a new way. And as a result of the paintings, I become friends with family members and friends of his. So I've actually got to hear firsthand stories about Muhammad Ali, which, like, oh my gosh, for me, it was just like, you know, and this piece is, here, I'll get out of the way. Oh, this piece is 17 symbols. So we have, like, here, this is actual Vietnam protest war art from like the 1960s and 70s. So like I said, my history degree comes in handy because I can find primary sources like this, right? Yeah. This was the official symbol for protesting racial injustice and the Vietnam War, during the Vietnam War, right here. So that's why that's there. Yeah. This is his 1960 gold medal from Rome. So when he won his first Olympic gold medal. And then you have, like, here, which is, what do you call it? Like Islamic prayer rugs, because every single day he'd pray 7 times, etc. And then you have just, memorabilia from his first fights. Yeah, it's just his whole life in one painting, and it's done on aluminum metal, which no one paints on.
Wow, that's amazing. Okay, quote me if I'm wrong, but didn't he throw that Olympic medal in the like in the river after he like came home and like was basically still being oppressed? Is that a true story?
Yeah, the story with that, behind that, is he went to Rome, he won the Olympic, he became the Olympic champion, and he talked about how proud he was to be American and he thought that coming home with a gold medal around his neck that he would be treated differently in Louisville. He thought that he would, you know, he'd like, I've earned respect now. I've earned my right to be here. And so he went to like a little restaurant, you know, in his hometown, and he went up to but it was a whites only place. But he's like, no, I'm Olympic champion. I'm gold medal champion. Like I can get served wherever I go, you know? So he steps in, he sits down. He's like, yes, ma'am, I'd like a burger and fries. And she turns to him and says, we don't serve your kind here. And he's like, well, I don't tend to like to eat Black people either. So, you know, he's trying to like, but apparently then the waitress left to go get the manager, you know, like to talk. He's like, I won Olympic gold champ. You see this medal? I won, you know, like I deserve to be here. I deserve to eat here. You can't treat me different. I'm an American champion, right? So she goes to get his manager, and he talks about this in one of his autobiographies where he's like building himself up, a speech in his head. I'm going to be strong. I'm going to say, you guys can't treat me this way. You know, and he's building himself up to say all this. And he was just silent when the manager came out, because he just totally shut down, because he was such an emotionally gifted person as well. And he just was so incredibly sensitive. People don't like know how sensitive he was, but he just shut down because he was not expecting that, right? So they kind of forced him to leave, and he goes out. And this is the night he was also almost lynched. And oddly enough, a few biographies, I read every single one, written on Muhammad Ali, leave this part out. And I've noticed it's because the ones that do were written by white authors, because they don't have the understanding sometimes, because they don't have the background of race. And so it's kind of hard. How do you write an autobiography or a biography on Muhammad Ali and leave out the lens of race in parts, you know? But this was very significant. So he comes outside, and there's bikers outside, white bikers. And he's like, you know, chest out, medal showing, walking out. And they're like, say, you know, and they're derogatory term, you know, you better be safe how you get home. Like they were basically threatening his life. And they knew where he lived, and like, And so he went to leave with his brother and they were on bikes, and he's like, we have to go this other way home. And his brother's like, why? That's longer. Why would you go that way? He's like, this is like, trust me, we should go this other way home. Just trust me. And it was like an intuitive feeling. And what actually happened is the bikers were following them and they were going to lynch him or attack him. And so they were biking over this one bridge, and he was so angry at that altercation and the incident that he took his gold medal and threw it over. And that's the story behind that night.
Wow. Yeah, that's crazy. Obviously, like I said, like he's such a immortal person that he'll live on forever, and like you can tell that he lives on in your paintings too. Like that those stories are like rooted, you know, like you can tell that, like hearing from you now, like knowing what I know now, like I can definitely like see the spirit of Muhammad Ali behind you, which is pretty cool. Like I wouldn't say that about most art. Like I just be like, it's a cool painting, you know what I mean? But to know like that's rooted in what it is. Talk to me about like maybe like a few more that have like had that level of like significance, as much as like Gabriel's, as much as the MMIW, as much as the Muhammad Ali one that seems important. Has there ever like been, you know, I feel like in ways probably there's always, you know, one, you know, smaller ways that the art comes to you, but have there been like a few of those pieces where you're just like kind of like in tune?
Like, you mean athlete pieces or human rights pieces?
Well, how about give me, if you have stories of both, give me one of each.
Well, in sports art, there's been some really cool moments. I paint a lot of sometimes really private moments for athletes. Like Jay Crowder, this one I did for him. This was early on in my career, I think 2017. But his mom was dying of cancer, and she had only I think 3 or 4 months to live. And they were like, Mother's Day was coming up, and they didn't know what to get her. What do you get for someone that, you know, you can buy anything for, but who doesn't have a lot of time left? And they realized that she had never taken a photo with her 5 adult children. And so they said, is there any way that you can put photos of us as adults together with our mom in the middle and paint it for Mother's Day? And I did. And I had like 3 days because they hit me up like so close to Mother's Day. But I remember one day I painted like 18 hours straight. And I remember this distinctly. I was like, this is the kind of meaningful work and the kind of impact that I want to make in the athlete world too. And the, you know, and it's like working hard now will benefit you later too. So I remember that like distinctly, and hearing that from other successful people, like put in the work and it'll pay off. So, and that painting ended up being the last gift she ever got before she passed away a few months later. And she like posted about it, about how meaningful it was. So it's like moments like that are really impactful for me. I've had tons of pieces. Like I just painted for Emile Smith Rowe on Arsenal.
Yeah.
I was having a hell of a year, right?
Right, absolutely. Yeah.
He followed me because I did a painting for Nicolas Pepe on Arsenal too. And then he's like, I don't know what I want yet, but like this happens a lot. Athletes will follow me for years, and then they'll be hit with a moment. It's like, I need that painted. And so he scored this goal, and I messaged him like, bro, we got to paint the celebration. And he's like, oh my God, we do. I was like, yes. And so he chose a few photos. I'm like, this one. And then I actually got to deliver it to him in person in London in October, and went to his house. His mom was there and his friends. And that was such a cool moment because I never, ever get to deliver paintings because everyone's far away.
Right.
Person. And so I didn't know this, but as I'm giving it to him, he goes, I wanted to let you know that that moment that you painted was the best moment of my life.
Damn. Wow.
And
Did it make you cry in that moment?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, you know,
Yeah.
so I've experienced really amazing moments with athletes. Like there's so many. I painted for 140 athletes at this point, right? Like 140 pieces. I have a piece behind me that's for the MLB's Adam Jones, and it's his like most infamous catch when he's playing for Team USA. And it's just like when you have one of the world's best athletes say, hey, can you paint the best moment of my life? You know?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Some cool upcoming projects though. The Nashville Stars baseball team. So they're trying to enter the MLB as the first team in baseball history to be named after a Negro League team. So the Nashville Stars Magic City baseball team. And they want to honor the legacy of Black baseball players who are considered the first civil rights activists in the States, right? Jackie Robinson was the first human in the States to desegregate an aspect of American society, right? Which at the time, baseball was the #1 watched sport. And so they want me to paint 100 years of Black baseball in one piece.
Wow.
So that's coming up. And then also Pepsi has asked me to paint a piece because I'm an HBCU athlete and artist, and they just signed a huge deal with the HBCU conference with the SWAC. And so they want me to paint a piece honoring Pepsi's Black history. So that's coming up. That's a big, big thing too. And then I've had like Connects reach out, a couple teams in Europe reach out. So I'm hopefully going to be doing kind of combining human rights and sports for teams and stuff. So that's cool.
That is dope. So take me through the one time that like, I'm sure I don't know how they reach out to you, emails, DMs, stuff like that. What's the like one DM that you're like, oh my God, I'm talking to this person, like, or like, you know, their team reaches out, or like basically like the craziest one that you can think of off the top of your head?
So actually the craziest messages I've gotten, and this is wild, is the family members of my idols who reached out. So Muhammad Ali's family, his daughters who have seen my work, like getting that message is saying, your piece is amazing. You've honored my father. Biggie Smalls' mom and manager told me that the painting I did of Biggie was the most, like, they said, 'cause a million artists have painted Biggie, right? And his manager said, this is the best painting I've ever seen to capture Biggie Smalls. Like, you can't beat that moment, you know? And his mom said the same thing. I'm just like, there's nowhere. And then Nipsey Hussle brother, Black Sam, said the painting I did in Nipsey was the best one that he's seen. And then Nipsey Hussle's best friend bought prints of it for the Marathon Studio. So like, what? You know, like,
yeah,
it's the family members of Bob Marley's family too. I'm friends with all of them because of how many times I painted Bob, and they say you captured our dad's soul. Like, those are the messages that like, it's like, all right, I can retire now. I'm good. You know, like, yeah.
Absolutely. You got to run me through because I'm just curious, because I think he's an amazing individual. What was it like to like meet Jamie Foxx and to like, you know, and capture a picture for him? Because for me, like that's one of the coolest guys. And I don't even know why, like, I don't know why I have a fascination with him, but like, I just think he's an extremely, extremely cool human being. So run me through that one.
Okay. The network I have now, I am surrounded by some of the most brilliant, talented, creative people on the planet. Like, my main friend group is wild, you know?
Yeah.
And so I'm used to creative genius, but Jamie is on a level that is, I actually have no words. Okay. Like, that man is the most creative, brilliant human I have ever met. Like, it's just wild. Like, I spent a day with him. He sang, he made a song up. He literally acted out for 3 hours, 2 scripts he wrote, and he was every single character. I'm sitting there in his kitchen like, how is this real life? Like, the whole time I was like, I wish I could record this right now so I could share it with everybody, because what is even happening? You know, like, I felt so honored. So that story was, his sister passed away. She had Down syndrome and passed away early. And it was last year. And his kind of like adopted brother in a way was like, Jamie's really sad. I've been following you for some time. I love your work. Is there a way that we can make a piece that honors Deandra and Jamie's relationship, unique relationship? And so he's like, is there a way we can do that? I'm like, sure. So his birthday was coming up, Christmas, and I painted this piece of them together. And he walked me through the whole experience of giving it to Jamie, and his reaction, I was bawling when I got the message. I'm like, oh my gosh. And he said that Jamie opened it up, having no idea what it was, and then saw the painting. He put it on his grand piano and just immediately started crying and playing. Like, and then he sent me these photos of Jamie with the piece, and you could tell he was like really upset. And then when I went to Jamie's house in September, the only thing in his living room was my painting.
Wow. Yeah. Holy man. How do you live through this life of like emotional roller coasters like this, man? You must be like, you know what I mean? Like, so many touching moments, and like all through something that, like, you know, basically more than anything, I feel like you've birthed, you know what I mean? Like, in a lot of ways, because I don't know of, or have heard of any like athletes that like transition into making art and doing so in such like a beautiful and vibrant way, like, and done so all the time. Like, you ever get like burnt out at all, or like, does it get to be too much sometimes, or like, you know what I mean? Like, you have to take step backs from different aspects of your life to like kind of like live in this one?
So my best friends get mad at me because I usually burn myself out. Like, I'll work 90 hours a week. That's normal. Right. Like, people complain about a 40-hour work week. No, 90 hours for me is very normal. And because I have underlying health conditions, my like break is when I end up in the hospital.
Wow. Yeah.
I usually work myself to the hospital, which is bad. Not suggesting. So I have more balance now. Like, I go to the gym and I'm eating better, and I'm not working 12 hours a day anymore, which is better. Don't advise. Do not advise. And so, no, it's these moments where I make people happy and do these really intense, emotional, creative projects, like that's what brings me to life. Like I love painting, but it's like reactions like Jamie's, reactions like Jay Crowder's mom, reactions like, you know, the different groups and organizations I work with. Like it's just that, you know, I love this kind of stuff, and I'm a workaholic and I love what I do. And it's like, it's not work when you're living your passion. So
Yeah, absolutely. And it like definitely comes out in your work too. You know what I mean? Like not a lot of people can like you said, like find that piece of themselves that is like like it doesn't feel like work, you know what I mean? And then to like encompass other things and like, you know, I'm sure as much as you give to paintings like that, it comes back tenfold. So that's, I mean, that must be cool. If you could choose, look at, I'm going to put you in a dark spot. If you could choose between, you know, going back and like maybe like rewriting your soccer career or like or starting the painting, would you wish it came out a little different, or like are you more like at peace with it than you've ever been?
that's a hard question.
I feel like I had to throw one at you because you were schooling me way too much. All of this was like, man, this is crazy. So yeah, I had to throw you one bad question. I'm sorry.
It was the day that I tore my ACL. I was at a elite tournament in the States, invite only by the top soccer players in North America, and it was weird. It was crazy because I knew something bad was going to happen, and I shouldn't go on the field. But I was playing for the assistant Canadian national team coach, and you don't say no.
Yeah.
So I got subbed in, and it's like, I don't know. Like, I thought about this moment a lot. Like, had I listened to my intuition and not gone on the field, and then like, I don't know. I think that everything happens for a reason. It was very hard for me to, like when I initially got injured and retired, right? When I was like 22, 23, all my friends from the South, you know, kept saying like, everything happens for a reason. Like God has a plan. And I'm not a religious person. I'm more spiritual, but like looking back, they were right. You know, it's like, I would not be making the money I'm making right now. And women's footballers don't make, you know, what I make as an artist.
Gang.
Yeah, you know, and like
Yeah.
I wouldn't give it up for the world because I'm living a dream life. Like I pinch myself constantly. Like I was in like Boston, New York last month, London the month before, meeting with the Premier League. I got to present my work to the Premier League. Like little Carling me, 4-year-old soccer player, was like, what is life right now? You know? And I constantly have these moments where I'm like, how is this my life? Like wake me up when it's, you know. And so no, I wouldn't change anything because and I still, to me, I'm in my infancy. This is like me at 1%. Like I've only been painting for 5 years. So, you know.
Wow, yeah, that's crazy to like to be at the levels that you're at and be like, yeah, I ain't even scratched the surface yet. Like not a lot of people will say that. And like, you know, the people that do, like I normally I would be like, I think you're capping, but I actually believe that like you're only, you know, just getting started in this, and like as your like mind grows and you know, like those connections happen even more and more, it's just gonna become like masterpieces. So that's really cool. Have you painted anyone from Manchester United? Like I'm a huge Manchester United fan. Have you painted anyone from Man U yet?
No, there was a player who I kept bugging because he like wanted pieces. Sometimes I'll be like, yo, you ready? You know? No, he got traded though, but no, not Man U. Man City is supposed to do a couple pieces, I think. Premier League players are a little bit more difficult to get to commission work because they're like gods to another level. Like everyone's like LeBron James over there. So like they just get free stuff all the time. Yeah. So they're a little bit more difficult because artists will literally paint them for free and not charge them anything. Like, so, but it's again, the reputation and the respect and relationships with players. So I think once I start painting for teams, I'll get a lot more, but I want to paint for every team in the Premier League. That's my goal. So
there we go. That would be really cool. What is the like the future hold for like everything outside of painting? Like what else is there? Any like things you like want to explore? Like basically, I guess you kind of said too, like you're a workaholic. Is there any chance of maybe like a little bit of like an unretirement, you know, like beer leagues, you know, like co-ed, start somewhere? Do you feel like your body can kind of like get back to football at all?
No, I prefer just going to a field and kicking around by myself. I started boxing in honor of this guy, but also it's a great workout. And I, you know, being a high level athlete and muscle memory, my body's kind of managed to stay in pretty good shape, but I want to tone up a bit. So boxing classes and stuff, which are fun. I have some really, really like probably the biggest project of my life that might even go do a master's degree at Columbia, an Ivy League school. They have the best Black History master's degree program in the States. But it's a series where I paint the truth about American history. And I have supporters in the celebrity world where I could make this like a 2-ring show, but a lot of white Americans will probably want to kill me. So, yeah, that's yeah, good thing I'm Canadian. But yeah, right now there's an attack on Indigenous history, Black history, and critical race theory in the States. Like they don't want any of this to be taught. A teacher was fired recently for teaching an anti-racism book to grade 3. Like he just was reading a book on anti-racism that's curated for 9-year-olds, and he was fired.
Right.
So there's an attack on America. Does not want to change American history in any way because they know that it's their most powerful tool to continue this oppression of minorities, right? They're like, no, we like it as it is, American history. And so they've tried different ways to incorporate Black history as of course. They're like, no. Critical race theory, no. And now they're just like, I think in Texas, they've banned Martin Luther King from some curriculum. Like, it's crazy. They've been banned Indigenous history from, I think, South Carolina. Like, it's now an attack on any voice in education, any narrative that's not like a white supremacist, basically. So yeah. I'm planning to do a series that completely undoes all that. Which will be crazy.
let me ask one question with that. Are a few of those pieces come, and maybe just in general, do any of your pieces come from anger, or like is it all like never? Like even when you're painting like you know things that like you said like upset you, or like you know what I mean personally, like have you ever gone to that space while you're painting?
No, I mean I've painted pieces out of heartbreak and stuff, but like the anger pieces, it's because again it's never my narrative that I'm painting, so it's not up to me to know what that looks like. But for me, the anger and injustice will come out in doing the work. It's like, okay, how can I address this issue in the best way and get it the most viewership, et cetera, right? That it's rooted in the research and the work. Like I'm a historian at heart, right? That was my first degree and an educator. So my artwork is rooted in that, because the deeper you dive into the truth, into the narratives that are that have been oppressed, that have been marginalized, that's when the art can come out of that and, you know, speak truth to power, paint truth to power, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that sounds amazing. And that does kind of like make sense once you explain it in that way too. And never paint angry, right?
No, I paint sad and I paint, but no, it's, I'm excited for, the work to go.
Hey, absolutely. Well, I just want to say thank you so much. Like this conversation has been amazing. What we like to do here is we always put you up on the screen. So, you know, like take as long as you want, you know, share a message, share whatever you need to, and then I'll come back on and give you a shout out. Sound good? Hey, no. You can just say what you need to, man. Like whatever you think. Don't overthink it. Just go for a few words. Sound good?
Okay.
Cool. Oh, wrong one. Look at that. I'm up now. Hold up. 1 sec.
Hi everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to a bit about my story. I appreciate you all. And if you're sports fans, you know, give me a follow on Instagram. I'll be painting your favorite athletes. And yeah, I appreciate you guys for tuning in. This has been awesome.
Hey, there we go. See, that's perfect. Yeah, I just want to say thank you so much, man. There's sometimes, you know, like you get the good conversations and like different things happen. Like I feel like in my own space, like I'm in a learning phase of my life, and like there's a lot of things that I still like don't necessarily understand, but like I definitely took a lot from what you were saying, and like understanding about your art and like how it works, but also too like to know that like you said, like I could definitely see why you know, the people down south and the indigenous people that invite you in, you know, you do feel like family, because they're like, you're just cut from a completely different cloth than, you know, 99.9. I'm sure you're going to find somebody like you somewhere, hopefully, you know, yeah, exactly. But there's got to be at least one more settler doing something crazy that we haven't heard about. That's totally invited to the cookouts and the powwows and to everything else. So yeah, I just wanted to say thank you so much. Like you've taught me a lot tonight, and also given me inspiration to, you know, find the beauty in artwork, or find the beauty in, you know, social justice, and to keep always doing just a little bit more. That sounds like, you know, your mantra and what you want to do, like always pushing it a little bit farther and trying so just a little bit harder. So thank you for your work. Thank you for your art, and like, just know that, you know, you always got a huge fan over here at Foxing Around. So thank you so much.
No, thank you. I appreciate you.
Hey, all right. Thank you. We'll chop it up soon. Much love. Thanks. Hold up. There we go, man. Yo, that was amazing. Yeah. Shout out Colin Jackson, man. Go give her a follow. I believe she goes by the Athlete Artist on Instagram. So if you want to check it out, go ahead and do that, man. I'm really excited. I'm home right now, man. I'm home for the holidays. I'm here with my family. It feels like I'm where I should be for the moment, but you know, it's chill. So River's going to be back tomorrow. I believe he's flying in from Arizona to North Balfour. So, you know, tune into our next episode next week. We'll probably be doing it in person. I think we're going to find somebody homegrown, or at least me and River will be together. So make sure you tune in. Much love. Take care of one another today, man. Do something nice this week. Try something different. Get out of your box a little bit, man. I don't really give too much advice, but that's a few things that I would say. So much love to everybody. Take care. Hi, and peace.